And speaking of thank yous to all the men and women that wear the uniform of our nation, we can't say it enough, but we owe them a debt of gratitude and we owe them a huge thank you. And as I have always said, if you want to gain faith in the future of our country and you want to gain faith in America's youth, you need only meet these young men and women that raise their right hand and swear an oath to our Constitution, because they truly are extraordinary. They make tremendous sacrifices so that we can live a life of freedom with the values that our country and our friends, partners, and allies have of a free and open world. And so to all those men and women, and certainly all the ones at U.S. Special Operations Command, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for everything you do day in and day out. I know we have some special guests here, and I'm honored to be a part of this and have an opportunity to introduce our keynote speaker for this afternoon, the Commanding General, General Rich Clarke. General Clarke's a great friend of mine. I have the utmost respect and admiration for him. He is a patriot, he is a leader, and he is a warfighter. And he's been in just about every combat operation our nation's been involved with since he was commissioned in 1984 from the U.S. Military Academy. And I think most importantly, he's a leader. He's been a leader since he was a second lieutenant, and he's a leader now, and he leads from out front. And he sets an example that every single person can follow. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, it is truly my honor and privilege to introduce the Commanding General, U.S. Special Operations Command, General Rich Clarke.
Hey, Hawk, thanks for those very kind words, and really appreciate what NDIA is doing to be a partner in this effort for all of us. So here we are, virtually. Never did I think any of us could have predicted this. About a little bit more than a year ago, I did my first SOPIC, and I was really looking forward to this year. I was excited that I was going to get to do something for a second time, but then COVID hit. And at first, this would have been a very easy cancellation or a postponement. It would have been very easy to cancel it. But what I advertise and hit for the audience is SOCOM doesn't quit. SOCOM does not quit, but we're also adaptable. And so we figured it out. The great team of NDIA, led by Hawk Carlisle and Christine Klein, and then our own team came together and said, let's make this work. So really, it speaks of the nature of our special operations forces that we are adaptable. So for all of you, welcome to the first ever virtual SOPIC. While I wish you were here, we're still glad that we can do this. Virtually, we all admit we'll have a couple glitches. I ask for your patience. I ask for you to give us some feedback. But what I would highlight for all of you, there's a silver lining here, because this is the largest ever Special Operations Forces industry conference that we have ever had. Because as I can see it, we have thousands of people signed up. Right now, about 4,000. And I think for every one of those 4,000, there's a couple other people watching on screen. So literally multiply that. I'm guessing right now we have 15 to 20,000 people that are participating right now. So thanks to you, our industry partners, for being out there. We look forward to your feedback, but we also look for the opportunity to collaborate over the next coming days. The other piece to this year's SOPIC was that every other year, we generally align this with our International Special Operations Forces Conference. So we bring in, and this year we had over 100 different international partners that were going to come here to Tampa to participate in SOPIC and then our ISOF conference. Because as our national defense strategy says, one of the most important things that we have as a nation, one of the things that we enjoy as a world community is the allies and partners that we work with here in SOCOM, but we work with across the globe. So while disappointed that our international partners could not be here today, I've talked to many of them, and many of them are here virtually with us and will be throughout the week. But the thing that this was able to afford us, something that has never happened in the history of SOFIC, is that we actually have a head of state that's up on screen right now that I'm going to introduce, our King of Jordan, who is not just a great friend to SOF, but is an advocate for the world in doing the right thing around the globe. So I'm honored to have with us today His Majesty the King, King Abdullah, who's going to say a few remarks. Over to you, sir.
Sir, thank you very much. General Clarke, Excellencies, I am truly delighted to have the honor of being part of this today, and hopefully we'll get past this and be able to do this in person next time we come around. But also allow me to start by thanking the National Defense Industrial Association and obviously the U.S. Special Operations Command for hosting this virtual meeting and to allow for vital discussions to continue. While countering the novel coronavirus and addressing its multifaceted impact is every country's priority, unfortunately, other threats to global security remain very real. And it is in these most difficult and uncertain circumstances that we must remain vigilant. So every day we are being presented with new challenges and even the resurfacing of previous ones. ISIS is increasing attacks in Iraq, for example, and are threatening to undo years of global efforts. These groups are also taking advantage of COVID-19 and targeting recruiting via social media, while foreign fighters continue to move from one conflict zone to another with the proliferation of weapons and militias. And extremists will capitalize on the economic situation as more people become prone to extremism, especially in protracted conflicts. And meanwhile, governments will be more vulnerable. These realities mean we need to be ahead of the curve. The grounds we have to function within are ever more dangerous and more complex, and risks are going to be much higher. Therefore, solid partnerships, precision, exchanging capabilities, fast communication, and information sharing is going to be truly vital. Political solutions to my region's open fronts become therefore more urgent, and avoidance of escalation measures or decisions is going to be an absolute must. So we need to continue working together and collaborating to bridge gaps in security and enhance cybersecurity and defense and offensive ops accordingly. So our cooperation is essential to securing a brighter, more peaceful future for the next generations. And Jordan was among the first countries to join the global coalition to defeat ISIS, and we truly remain committed to closely coordinating with international partners to face these challenges head on. And we are also committed to offering expertise through the Aqaba process platform that was launched in 2015 to coordinate efforts to counter terrorism and violent extremism and collaborate on quick impact projects with international partners. So what we've learned from the Aqaba process, and most recently from COVID-19 crisis, is that our chances of success increase exponentially only if we partner. And that, in order to survive, address challenges, and thrive, we need desperately to work with each other. We need to seek better integration, what I call globalization, that builds capacity, cooperation, and positive interdependence. And finally, I would be remiss not to mention our historical ties with the United States and our effective partnership with the U.S. Special Operations Command and Special Operations Forces. This is a strategic relationship we are very proud of and are always keen on enhancing. Sir, thank you very much, and I am honored to be here with you today.
Hey, Your Majesty, thank you very much for those comments and for joining us today. I think it's about 8:30 or 9 o'clock Jordan time. So for you, just to highlight, for you to take your personal time to be with us tonight signals very much about this relationship, as Jordan is clearly a net exporter of security globally, and you have hosted us inside your wonderful country of U.S. SOCOM to really help the entire world. So, your king, it was great seeing you. Thank you very much for being
Thank you, sir. A pleasure.
I'm going to reflect a little bit about some of the historical significant events that just occurred within the last month to set the stage for some of the things I'm going to talk about here this afternoon. Last week, we celebrated Victory in Europe Day, World War II, the end of the war, to end all wars in Europe. And we realistically had a pretty sustainable peace since then. But while there were SOCOM forces that participated in actions during World War II, there was no SOCOM at the time. We had soft forces. But what World War II taught us is it forged the foundation for the joint force, but it also forged a foundation to work with allies and partners. And that is one of the most significant revolutions that we learned from our fight during World War II as the nations coming together to fight the evil. And then last month, to bring it to SOCOM specifically, we recognized, while we did not celebrate the anniversary of Eagle Claw, the failed rescue attempt at Desert One in the Iranian desert to try to recover the U.S. hostages of the Iranian regime. And that single event is probably most responsible for Congress then determining that we must have an element that is joint and is enabled with the right acquisition authorities. But I think it's important to remember the heroism, while even failed during that event, when the force after failure went back to Oman, where they'd begun the operation for most of the forces. And one of our allies, the British allies, did not know that the mission had taken place, but then realized it when they saw the recovering force come back. And they brought them a couple cases of beer. But on top of that, they carved out a piece of cardboard and they wrote on it, "To you all, from us all, for having the guts to try." And while that mission ended in failure, and as you look at the picture that is displayed, and you look at the failure and ashes, from those ashes rose U.S. SOCOM. The phoenix rose from that. But one thing for industry is what also rose from that is our ability that Congress recognized to have SOCOM peculiar funding and authorities to acquire soft specific equipment. And over those 33 years since SOCOM was established, that partnership with industry will continue and has allowed us to have the decisive advantage against our enemy. So I think it's important context to look back at that history. We are the only COCOM that has an acquisition authority. Now, stepping into today's era of national security, there are still challenges that lie ahead. Our national defense strategy, written in 2017, recognized the national security threats. Where previously it had been violent extremism all the time, and we didn't have any near-peer threats. We didn't, and we had a significant amount of resources. But as the department prioritized and looked at the threats that were on the horizon, while VEO is still a threat that we have to pay attention to, as His Majesty the King just talked about, we also have to look at those near-peer threats for the long term of our nation. And the national defense strategy is clear. Got to build a more lethal force. We have to continue to foster our allies and grow more partners, and we got to reform. And in case of SOCOM, we have to reform to meet those threats. But what I attest to all of you is that SOF will remain an integral part of our nation's solutions to tough strategic problems. We must provide our people every single possible advantage in every domain that exists. And while I'm convinced that soft, it should not be the easy button and the solution to every single problem, we have to prioritize and make sure that we set our operators up for success. As you look into the future, I'm breaking this down into 3 wars that we have that we have on the horizon, that we have right now. Number 1 is the war on extremism. Number 2 is the war on influence, and number 3 is a war for talent. And I'm going to talk about all those 3 specifically. But to have a meaningful partnership with industry in all 3 of these will make a difference. So first, the war on extremism. Many people point to 9/11 as the beginning of that. It's actually longer. It's been going on for generations before that. It was highlighted to our nation. It became a main effort when Osama bin Laden attacked our country on 9/11. But what we can't look at this as a single fight in a single event, because this is going to be a generational fight. It's something that SOCOM is going to be involved in for the long haul. 9 years ago, almost exactly 1 week, 9 years and 1 week ago, I was fortunate enough to play a very small part in the raid on Osama bin Laden. Well, it was a great day for our country to actually get retribution for his attacks on us. It was not the end. While we were proud that night, this is one that we can never be satisfied. And on that night, with that raid, soft forces conducted 13 other raids that were probably just as dangerous, that were maybe not as important as that one, but our forces were in harm's way that night, and they were in harm's way the next night, and they're in harm's way today. We're going to continue with this fight, and we're going to continue this fight for generations. And we have to prioritize. We have to make sure that we understand that this is a long-term objective. And while we can't be everywhere, we're not going to have unlimited resources to approach this. And we're going to have to look for sustainable models. And we also are going to have to prioritize those with a specific focus on threat-based assessments. And we also have to include our allies and partners in this fight. But this is something that we can't, in U.S. SOCOM, with our soft forces, be everywhere for everything in this BEO fight. The great news story this year when soft forces again went after ISIS and went after the leader of ISIS, and the caliphate was destroyed last year. But it just highlights again the destruction of one individual is not going to lead to the end of this. So counter VEO will remain SOCOM's #1 priority. But let me highlight something for everybody. Going after the VEOs is not mutually exclusive from actually competing with great powers. It absolutely is not. Last year, soon after I did SOFIC version 1, I took a trip out to the Indo-Pacific. As I visited our forces in places like Philippines, Japan, Korea, and into Thailand and Singapore, our #1 advantage as a nation is our allies and partners. But it also highlighted for me that counter VEO actually equals great power competition. By our presence in the Indo-Pacific on that visit, but also globally in places around the world. Our soft forces fighting VEOs, those capabilities that are required for that serve a dual purpose. By being there, we are also countering great nation states. So what's the takeaway for industry? And what's the way we should be thinking about this going forward? Is no longer can we just build counter VEO capabilities that serve a single purpose to counter VEO. But as we look at the lethality, precision, and mobility requirements as examples, we absolutely have to develop them that they can compete and win with Russia and China, but they could also work in a counter VEO fight. Because the environments we're going to be facing in the future are going to challenge our communication. They're going to challenge our precision navigation. The unmanned aerial systems that our adversaries are using now globally, we have to look at methods that will defeat those and protect our forces. Because going in the future, SOCOM is going to remain engaged. We're going to be working in small units, in remote, austere environments, and we're going to be working with partner forces around the globe. So as you're thinking about capability requirements, I'd ask you to think about the continuous engagement of dual capabilities. The second war that I want to talk about is, for just a minute, is the war for influence. Great power competition is about influence. And SOF have a unique and valuable role in this. Number one, and I just mentioned as I talked about violent extremism, is our influence through physical presence. The market will bear small special forces teams that are spread throughout Europe. They're inside the Indo-Pacific. They're in Africa. We work in South America. And those partnerships that we develop with many of our SOF partners and with those militaries and our interagency partners is important. But the physical presence matters. But we also have to think about the non-physical space and the information space. As my senior enlisted leader, Greg Smith, and I have traveled and visited forces throughout the globe, we were able to see this in action. And I'm convinced as we look at the info space and in our fight for competition and against the violent extremism, working in the information space can have the greatest impact in the coming years. Let me give you an example in Afghanistan. When I was in Afghanistan, all the way back to 2002, various deployments, all the way through 2011, I probably, as a commander at that time, spent about 90% of my time thinking about the kinetic fight, the raid, the mission, the kill capture mission, the destruction of the enemy forces. As Sergeant Major Smith, Chief Smith and I went over to Afghanistan last year, and we're talking to our SOF leadership there. The commander there on the ground now spends 60% of his time working in the information space. Think about that, 60% of his time, thinking about how is he influencing the Taliban thought process? How is he involved with the Afghan population and what they're thinking? Because we're going to win this through population and their support for the Afghan government as one example. So as we think about the information, how we do this locally, but as we also think about it regionally, it's going to be critical to the U.S. Ability to be able to be successful in future fights. And so one specific thing here to U.S. SOCOM is that we were directed here to put a joint MISO Web Ops Center, the ability to work our Web Ops, to coordinate things in the information space across the globe. And as we look at the ability to influence and shape in this environment, we're going to have to have artificial intelligence and machine learning tools specifically for information ops that hit a very broad portfolio. Because we're going to have to understand how the adversary is thinking, how the population is thinking, and work in these spaces in time of relevance. Because if you're not at speed, you won't be relevant. And to make sure that the U.S. message and our allies and partner message is being heard and is resonating. And so what we need is adapting, data tech that will actually work in this space and that we can use it for our organization. And the third thing I'm going to talk about is our war for talent. We still need the best men and women in the United States to come into SOCOM. We still need, as you can look at the pictures, we still need guys that can kick down the door, that can shoot well, can jump out of airplanes, can fly, our special operators. We need all those men and women in our formations. But we also need coders. We also need leaders who can apply AI. We've been having discussions internal that it may no longer be that the most important person on the mission is actually the special forces operator who's kicking down the door, but it could be the cyber operator that the special operations team actually has to get to the environment and make sure that he or she can work his or her cyber tools into fight. So I highlight we have to flip this discussion about what we need in the future. While we still need great people, but as we look at this, we have to look at how we're recruiting talent and how we're bringing them into SOCOM. We also, in the acquisition force, we have to look at how we're changing things. Just recently, I had a session with a very, very senior tech executive. And one thing I asked him about was our acquisition people, and do they understand the acquisition requirements inside of US SOCOM? And he basically said, General, you're being really polite. Your acquisition people don't understand what the requirements are outside of the hardware stuff. You need to look at what your software is. You need to look at how you're recruiting talent. And right now, basically, you suck. And you need to work on this. That tech exec was Eric Schmidt. And he highlighted for me that we have to make some changes. So as we go forward, this is a dilemma. We're not necessarily competing with China and Russia in this space. We're competing with each other for the best talent. But as I look at this, is not a zero-sum game. And there's no battle lines being driven, but we all have to look at creative solutions to share talent. And we're looking specifically at internships, talent exchanges, and many options. I'm standing right now in our SoftWorks. Right next door is our newest effort, our data engineering lab. But we are looking for ways to partner with industry to develop an AI-ready soft force. I'm convinced that with this, we can be mutually beneficial as we're reaching out to academia, as we're working with industry. But we have to have the talent individuals in this fight. So a couple final thoughts. Back to the future. As Hawk Carlisle said, I graduated in 1984 and then showed up my first duty assignment in 1985. The same year that great movie Back to the Future came out. Everybody remembers the DeLorean and going back in the time zone. To me, some of this looks familiar. My first assignment in the Cold War was going over to Germany as a brand new lieutenant. I knew exactly where my platoon fighting position was in the Fulda Gap. I knew where the Russians were going to come across. But I also knew that there were Green Beret teams that were spread throughout Europe that the Russians clearly saw as a main effort. We're doing that again in Europe, and our forces are postured. What's changed is we don't necessarily have the same Cold War clarity that we had then. And we don't have necessarily, going into the future, the Reagan era buildup. And this is a little bit more tactically complex with the capabilities that our enemy has today. But I'm convinced, as our Secretary of Defense has said, to win, we must contend with competitor capability. We must address emerging technologies. And in order to win, we have to fight in multiple domains. I'm convinced that SOF going forward will be a critical element, but we must train, equip, and develop to win in all three of the wars that I mentioned. So in ending, we can never forget the sacrifices that our forces in our joint force have endured for these last 20 plus years. Over 5,000 are deployed right now. Together, we must make them successful. So I appreciate you all bearing with us with this soft conference. Really look forward to your questions. Thank you very much. Okay, so. That popped in is, how is SOCOM SOF adjusting to the COVID-19 environment? Number one, our force is doing well. As I said up front, we have adapted. We can overcome this. We have not abandoned our partners overseas. I think that's important, that there were some that believed that we would absolutely depart. We remain engaged. But our SOCOM priorities remain protecting our forces, protecting our DoD civilians, and what we can't forget in this environment is protecting our families and safeguarding all our national security capabilities, our national mission force. So I think this first ever virtual SOFIC demonstrates that ability to adapt and take care of our force. So thanks for that question. I'm going to go to the next question. Sir, from Jerry Graybill. Sir, do you foresee virtual SOFIC going forward in the future, or will it be more of a hybrid approach, or back to how we have always done it? Well, hey, Jerry, I'm not sure where you're dialing in from or calling in from, but number one, I hope to see you next year. If it's up to me and COVID works out well, we will do SOFIC here, and I think it's important, we will do ISOF here. So I do plan on doing that. But I think we'll look for you all's feedback. Virtual does have benefits. So I think we could see additional people dial in. We could open it up some. We got to figure out how to do those things. But I look forward to seeing you all in the Tampa Convention Center next year as we do this. All right. I'm going to take the next question, which, what are your top priority needs from industry right now? I think we've been pretty clear on this. Our great soft acquisition technology team. I'll list our priorities. Number one, next generation ISR. We have to look at where we're going in our ISR so that it is sustainable, that it in fact can provide the capabilities in both great power competition, but also working, as I described earlier, for our soft teams in remote, austere, short takeoff and landing battlefields for our soft forces. We've got to have the next generation mobility, but we also have to look at next generation effects. All of you have heard us talk about our hyper-enabled operator, so that individual that's forward has all the tools that he or she needs as far forward as possible. We're looking at biotechnologies and human-machine interfaces I talked about a little bit. And finally, our data and our networks. We have to look at things like cross-domain solutions so that we can pull in publicly available information along with our secret systems, along with our top secret systems, to be able to make our soft operators more capable. So all with that, as I talked about, artificial intelligence and machine learning. So thanks for that great question. Okay. We are seeing, next question from John Wilcox. We are seeing a battle for resources emerging. How do you maintain the emphasis and resourcing on traditional soft missions in an era of great power competition? John, thanks for that question. It's a really good one. Number one, we have to prioritize. And as we look at, as I talked about a little bit, we can't be everywhere. We can't do everything for SOF. So we have to prioritize within and with our global combatant commanders of providing SOF forces for them. That's number one. And number two, we can't be all things to all people. If it is not a SOF specific mission and a conventional force can do it, and as things have evolved, if that conventional force can do that mission, then we should absolutely allow our conventional partners to do that. And then third, we absolutely have to leverage our allies and partners. And so as you go into both VEO and great power competition, we have to look at where SOF is uniquely skilled and qualified to do those missions going forward. But I think, I hope that got to your question. This is a little bit more challenging, truthfully, than I thought, just to go through questions and not get to see the audience feedback, in live. So I'm going to go to the next question, which is, how is SOCOM leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning? Let me hit a couple highlights for you on that one. First, it's really important that we are linked up very, very closely with the Department of Defense's Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, headed by a 3-star general. Just talked to him a couple weeks ago. They are helping pull in all the joint force efforts in artificial intelligence. But also, we're committed to rolling out specific things in the near term. Number one, we've already had success with predictive maintenance, working with our 160th Special Operations Command Aviation Regiment. By using predictive maintenance through artificial intelligence, we've actually increased their readiness and lethality. Oh, by the way, saving money. But most importantly is that we're actually able to keep those helicopters flying longer because we're able to be predictive in our projections as to the status of some of the specific equipment on those helicopters. Second thing we're doing in the artificial intelligence and machine learning environment is employing AI-enabled mission command forward. One of the biggest advantages of working with the AI task force with DoD is our direct involvement in combat operations every single day. And we have repeatable processes and functions that make themselves fit with AI very cleanly. So where our forces are conducting battlefield operations every single night, we have AI teams with them, looking at those processes, recording them, pulling in the data, and then fusing this physical and information environment so we can make faster decision making going forward. So spending a lot of time with our forward forces with that enabled mission command. And then finally, as I talked about a little bit in the information space, we're really looking at AI that can be applied against information warfare. So how can we, in real time, sense what the enemy is stating publicly so we can counter that message? So we can look at so in real time, we can leverage the technology that can see what they're working in the Twitter sphere or what they're working in the information environment, so we can respond in real time at the speed of relevance. So we right now have artificial intelligence and machine learning efforts are integrated into most of our major PEO programs, and we'll continue this. And then just recently, and Jim Smith, who's going to speak after me, our head of acquisition technology, he has stood up a new PEO specifically for soft digital apps. We got a real focus on this, and we're going to continue. I got a question from Jonathan Coy. You mentioned top talent is critical. Top talent is not cheap. How can industry and SOCOM move away from LPT award criteria so industry can continue to provide you that top talent. Jonathan, I'm gonna have to phone a friend and ask what LPTA is. Okay. Okay, lowest point, technically a separate war criteria so industry can provide that top talent. Hey, Jonathan, I'll be the first to admit I'm not an expert in this area, but what I will tell you is we are leveraging academia. I have personally been out to Stanford, MIT, our Naval Postgraduate School, Harvard, Tufts, and we're looking for internships. We have developed a CRADA with University of South Florida here to try to bring in the young people that are willing to do an internship for us in the summer. Hopefully, maybe we'll recruit. We'll see what they do or say. But we're going to bring them in here for trial runs because we want to give young men and women throughout the United States internship capabilities. We're bringing in some this summer. Right here to SoftWorks, and we're actually deploying some forward. So we're exposing on one side. And then secondly, we're looking at contracts to bring in highly qualified experts into our formations so that they can, in fact, infuse some of the knowledge of AI and AI and machine learning into SOCOM and be able to have the outreach. We have found, and I have seen in my travels throughout the United States, is people want to protect our national security. They want to be involved with SOCOM. They get infused by actually seeing things that are delivered and seeing real world results. And I think that's the thing that we offer here in U.S. SOCOM is we provide that opportunity for young men and women to be able to serve their nation in a meaningful way. So thanks for that question. I'm going to go, can you explain how the hyper-enabling operators is needed for future soft missions? When I first got to SOCOM a little bit over a year ago, a lot of people were talking about the Iron Man suit and the Talos and what that brought. And what I remember most vividly about that effort was really the idea. The idea that our folks that are in harm's way absolutely deserve the most capable, the most lethal, but also the most defensive capabilities that were available to them. And so it was the concept that spun off. While today's technology doesn't allow for the Iron Man suit, there's no Tony Stark, but the idea is there that in the future, in the operating environment it's going to be increasingly complex, dynamic, and lethal. And what we're always going to seek to provide for our soft operators is a qualitative military advantage to protect our nation's interests. And so that's the way I'm approaching this, that at the edge, that our operators who need it the most can have that near real-time collection of data and understand in an ambiguous situation what is most important to them. Because you got thousands upon thousands of injects when you're in that environment. And how do you distill it down to what's really important that's going to, one, allow our operators to accomplish the mission, but at the same time, keep them safe? So it's a great question to end on, because I'm getting the virtual hook for today's thing. I really appreciate all of you for bearing with me, for being here today. We want your feedback. So please, I implore you to provide that, whether it's fantastic or whether it's a needs improvement. We'll take it, because I'm convinced that that's the one thing that our soft operators do better than anything else is, they are a learning, growing team. and they will always take that input and improve upon it the next time. So thanks to you all. Thanks for what you do. Good luck, Godspeed, and keep healthy in this COVID environment. Have a great day.